for the latest episode of the Athlete Connection. Really excited with a longtime friend, guest of the show. Really excited to kind of hear her story and really have a conversation around her journey and kind of what got her to where she is today. But without further ado, we have Miss Monica Lopez with us today. Say hi, Monica.
Hello. Thank you guys so much for having me today. I feel like we're having a nice little reunion right now.
I know, right? We go way back, like four flats on a Cadillac, or is it Cadillac with four flats? Anyway, but anyway, we always kick off the show with just a little bit of context for everyone who might be maybe new to the show, but really we want to create a platform to connect, upcoming athletes with previous or former athletes or even existing or current professional athletes, just to kind of bridge that gap, give them a little bit of an opportunity to hear different perspectives, gain some additional insights from a different background, just so again it gives them a little bit of an idea of what they potentially might be experiencing or going through as they move forward. So if you could just again tell everybody, your name, obviously what sport you play, where you're at, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, like I said, thanks so much for having me. My name is Monica. I am a former volleyball player. Um, and currently I work as a health and wellness coach for UC San Diego. Yeah, living in Texas right now.
That's cool. So you were a former volleyball player at what college? Obviously, what was your journey like starting off? How'd you get involved in the sport? Was that your first sport of choice? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually started playing when I was 7 years old. So long time in the game. Before that, I was in martial arts, specifically Taekwondo. So that kind of transitioned me into the sport. I loved martial arts and have really still love it to this day. But it was just one of those things where, growing up, I was like, what else is out there? And so when I saw one of my cousins actually playing volleyball, that's where I really started to get into it. And then fast forward a few years after that, I really started to love the sport, wanted to involve myself even more into it. So I got into club, play all throughout high school, and then went to the University of Laverne, which is a Division III NCAA school, and left my career there.
I mean, that is super cool. And I love the modest version of Monica because when you say like martial arts, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I did karate too." Oh my gosh, no, no, you have a legacy of family through. I mean, you're a black belt as well, so it's not just like, "Oh yeah, I did a little martial art." No, it was like intense.
Right. I was
So
gonna say
like
she just glossed over the fact that she's a black belt. No big
R-
deal.
so when did you realize that you had like I guess that potential for volleyball? Like what explain like walk us through that aspect, or do you remember like, oh man, yeah, volleyball, I want to switch it over, become an elite athlete over here at volleyball?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was growing up, I was like fully immersed in martial arts, right? My parents had their martial arts studio out in Fontana. And so it was like live and breathe martial arts, right? Obviously, you guys know my brother, he is a legend to say the least. So I mean, I was fully immersed into Taekwondo. And so growing up, I mean, I loved all sports at the time, but I wasn't necessarily fully immersed in them. And so I just got really curious at the age of 7 as to what else was out there, right? And so I was like, maybe try basketball, okay, try soccer. And I loved that martial arts allowed me the opportunity to be pretty proficient in all of those, right? And of course, not the best because you got to think about technique, right? But as far as like the stability, the balance, the explosiveness, all of that stuff really transferred over to like my stuff in volleyball in particular, right? And so like I said, I started when I was 7 years old, and I think it was about like 9, 10, that kind of range where I was like, okay, let's kind of see where else that this can take me, right? And so I think that was the time where we started really looking to club volleyball. And so I got myself, or my family got myself, into Rancho Valley Volleyball Club, which I stayed all throughout like my volleyball career throughout high school. And so that was really like the 9, 10 year old age where I was like, let's see what else this, what all other opportunities this can provide me, right? And on top of that, I see my brother, who you guys kind of know a little bit more about him. I'm like, I want to be like him. I want to see, where this
Shout out Peter. Shout out to Peter so everyone knows who he is. There you go.
Yeah. So I really did want to see like where else this could take me. And that's essentially how it all kind of started out.
That's cool. So fast forward, obviously you started seven, and then obviously you went the club route. We all know, kind of what that was like, but maybe describe or talk about that experience, getting introduced to the club scene and how did that translate to your development and obviously getting you to, where you wanted to kind of compete in high school and obviously eventually in the collegiate sports.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, club volleyball and volleyball in Southern California is a whole different breed. I think it's very competitive. It's just full go. And I think at the time, like a lot of volleyball players and people my age were just a one sport athlete. So they were really, really focused on that one sport. So to say the least, it was very competitive. But I just remember being super I guess just really enjoying that moment and enjoying the time that I had. And the biggest thing too for me, like the huge learning curve for me was going from an individual sport to a team sport. That was huge. So it was difficult in that sense, but nonetheless, it took me a few years to kind of really translate to that. And so, it was so interesting to like see myself develop and like go to privates on top of doing all the practices twice a week or three times a week, depending on what kind of like team you're on, and so it's crazy. Like at 10, 11, 12, like those girls, like they can hit. And at the time I was pretty tall for my age. But then like I got to high school and I was like, okay, I'm not growing anymore, right? So then there was like there was a period too where I kind of had to, kind of take a step back and like humble myself too of okay, what else is out there? Not necessarily in like other sports, but more so in different positions, right? So it was challenging in that sense that I had to like learn all different positions and then go into high school and be a completely different position and then go into college and kind of the same thing, find myself in a different position there.
So, so you had a different experience than a lot of us, because yeah, I mean, explained a couple of things where you went from a single sport to or sorry, just worrying about myself opposed to a team. I understand that track, right? So you went there, and then it was a humbling experience where it's like, shoot, I'm these Amazons right here, and how tall are you? Not to
Five
throw,
two, five
right?
two, five two, good day.
So explain your recruiting process. Like, how did you make yourself stand out? Like, how did that go?
It was difficult to be honest with you because I didn't know what that process was like. Obviously, like I don't necessarily have anyone to look up to in that sense, and on my end too, I didn't really ask. At the time when I was in high school, I was a pretty shy kid. So I wasn't necessarily like asking too many people very many questions. I didn't go ahead and do my due diligence in that sense. So it was literally just learning by doing at that point. And I specifically remember like kind of, to be honest with you, when I was in high school, I was like, either I play volleyball or I don't, and that's kind of okay. So as far as the recruiting process, I just remember like going ahead and sending like a full blown profile to different colleges and stuff like that. I think I sent about 7 or 8. And like I was like, if it happens, awesome. If it doesn't, like it's okay. I had a really great experience with volleyball at the time. And then lucky enough, I think a few months before I was going to graduate, I got a call from Laverne to go ahead and go visit and stuff like that. And yeah, I was like, okay, well, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, that's great. So, like you said, you were good whether you made it at the college level or you didn't, but talk a little bit about your preparation. Like, what was that like, or that experience going through that? And, for some of those kids, those athletes that maybe aren't the top recruits on their teams and things like that, like, what do you recommend or, what do you suggest to kind of help them through that journey as well?
Holy cow. Yeah. Well, as far as the physical point of view, like the speed and agility stuff, like the stuff that I did growing up with, plyometrics and strength and conditioning and all that stuff. I mean, it really helped me develop into the athlete that I was, and to be honest, the athlete that I am right now. And so like that for sure is going to differentiate like the good from the great. Of course, you have the technique and stuff, like the sport specific stuff that you definitely need to work on. But in terms of all that other stuff, like the strength and conditioning, the speed and agility, the plyometrics of that, it really did separate, a few of the other girls. And then I think, from the mental point of view too, and I look back at this, like believing in yourself, to be honest with you, like knowing that you have the opportunity or the ability to go ahead and do this. I think confidence, I look back and I guess I look back and I wish I had a little bit more confidence within myself. And so I think if you truly like, you have to just believe that you can do it and push forward, even if you don't necessarily have a clear path, like just find ways and ask questions as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, how did you get to that point to where you figured out, oh, I need to send emails or reach out to these colleges? Like you said, you obviously didn't have anyone to guide you or show you. So like what made you figure out, okay, this is what I want to do, or even how to do it, or how to find those contacts? Like how do you go about, or how did you go about doing that to kind of at least find the interest from those colleges, or ultimately obviously even Laverne?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was like very brief questions to my peers here and there, like just kind of figuring out what they were doing. And then from there, like I had to do my own research, right? So I went on the internet and like I looked at the university. First and foremost, you got to figure out which university you're kind of interested in. And then from there, go through their athletic web page, right? So again, from my understanding, like I didn't know that athletics and like the colleges had their different websites. Like the smallest things, were so like just so new to me. So I had to find the athletic website to these particular places. And then you got to look up the coaches, and then you have to look up their emails and their bios, right? So I think the other thing too is like taking a look to see what coaches, like who you want to coach you too, right? So taking a look at their background and stuff like that, and seeing if that's something that interests you or something that you want someone to lead you through the next 4-ish years.
So you said something like rewinding, because you said like you were a shy person before, and then for me, like I remember that shy high school. I'm telling my age now, and then now to who you are now, it's like mind blowing, right? It's like shy, not Monica, right? So there was a transition. So, and a lot of, for me, it was college, right? A little bit afterwards. So explain to us the college experience that brought you right now.
Yeah. So I, kind of to even rewind a little bit more, I grew up like elementary, middle, junior high, like in a private school. So it was like my class was like 40 kids max, right? And then when I was in 8th grade, graduated, and I decided I had the option to go to a private school or to go to a public school, right? So I was like, you know what, let's go to a public school. Let's try to like branch out and learn something a little bit new. And that was like a culture shock for me. It was a huge shock because I was so used to having, kids that I've known since I was 7, 8 years old. And now I don't know anyone. Right. And like my class size is like 800, I think it was, like at Los Osos. So you go from a class of 40 to a class of 805. And that for me was a huge change. Right. So I think that kind of brought me into a little hole. Well, then we fast forward, right, and go, graduate senior year and go into college, and I'm back into a smaller school, which was really, really cool to get back into. So, you go into it, you know your team, right, and then you start to learn or know all these other teams and the other teammates, and like you go to these different their games, and you have them in your classes, and a lot of the athletes at the time, they had their degree in kinesiology. So we all kind of had similar classes and stuff like that. And so that really helped me to get back into like my personal groove and my confidence, because I was kind of back into like a small school environment, which was really, really neat to kind of have that in my undergrad years.
I mean, it explains a lot. Because again, all these memories starting to flood back. It's like, oh yeah, I guess she was kind of. Um, so looking back at everything, right? And you just took us through, like, man, you did a brilliant job at showing us, high school to college. Now looking back, on your college, high school career, is there anything that you would do differently? Because you already had that attitude at one point in time. It's like, you know what? If I succeed at volleyball, cool. If I don't, it is what it is. It's fun. So,
Yeah.
is there anything that you would do differently? Looking back at everything now.
For sure. I would do a lot of things differently, to be honest with you. I think, and I don't regret anything, but I would definitely wish that I know that I worked hard, but I do know that I could have put even more effort in, for sure, 100%. I look back and I'm like, man, I could have, I could have asked more questions. I think I was alluding to that a little bit earlier. I could have just been more curious and be okay with like asking random people, or not necessarily random people, but people I might have been like too scared to ask. Um, and I think as far as like volleyball, I definitely could have done a little bit more of like, say, privates, or more speed and agility stuff. Like, I definitely feel like that in those little things, I could have excelled a little bit more, for sure. And I think that would have helped me build my confidence even more, to feel more comfortable to ask even more questions, or to just be more curious about other opportunities.
What do you think is the most important thing? Again, this is all kind of looking back, retrospective, but like looking back, what do you think the most important thing was that you took out of that situation? Was it like figuring out how to network and finding the right people, or was it, the athletic development? Like, what do you think was probably one of the most important things that you're like, oh, I gathered that this is what I take away from this experience?
That's a really good question. I look back and I think I could have networked a lot more. I think especially nowadays, like when you kind of translate all of this stuff into like the real world job stuff, like networking is absolutely huge. So if you can do that very early on, like as you're younger, and be confident to like say, hey, my name is Monica, or hey, my name is Ray, like most certainly you need to do that. And I think that helps not only in like, again, the real world stuff, but like looking back, I could have just met more people, and could have had so many more opportunities because of that. And that just, that just goes with having a little bit more confidence within yourself, to be like, hey, like I could be at that caliber with that person, you know what I mean? Or I am at that level with that person, and believing yourself in that sense too. And then just like stepping out of your comfort zone. I think that's a huge thing too, is like, it's very easy to be in a certain situation, but like, the growth always comes with stepping out of that comfort zone.
You're giving us so much golden knowledge, and I don't even have to ask, but I want to ask this. Lastly, like, what advice would you give the next generation, the next Monicas, who, from a reality, speaking just at your sport, who may not be 6'2" out the womb, 6'3" out the womb, maybe 5'2", maybe 5'4", but they have this dream. What advice would you give them, looking back at it again, to the next generation?
Mm. Um, Gosh, I think the advice I would give is that, like, yes, you can. Yes, you can do it. That's something that I really wish that I knew it, but it's so different when like you believe it. So it's, like, believe that you can do it, have the confidence within yourself, because you have so much untapped potential within you. And like your only limitation is your imagination. Like and that's just like, yeah, that's my advice. That's all I could say.
That's spot on because I was listening to something I don't know yesterday, or maybe it's like maybe the Kevin Hart podcast on the Pivot or something, but he was talking about don't be your own worst enemy. Like there's nothing standing in the way of you even trying to do something other than you. But if you already kind of um, reduce yourself down to you can't, you won't, or don't even take those steps even to trying, then you're already behind the eight ball. So I think that's spot on with exactly what you're saying. And it's so true because, I mean, especially within athletes, and we talked about this in some of the previous episodes, but we all know there's going to be adversity, but if you don't figure out how to find that solution, how to overcome that adversity, then, you're going to be that group or that person that falls out. And we know there's always that attrition, right? So how do you kind of press on and find those solutions or network with people or ask those right questions? Because that's ultimately kind of teaching you those life lessons to kind of how to push through, how to set yourself up for success. Um, that's great. So, obviously we talked about your experience. Talk a little bit about what you're doing now, and maybe how does that tie into obviously that experience, that journey that you ultimately kind of got you to where you're at now.
Yeah, so I work as a health and wellness coach. And so I talk to patients about, bettering their nutrition as well as bettering their exercise. And on top of that, like other different things that compose like that involve wellness, right? So, yeah, I think for me, like when I talk to my patients, again, I have to come with this approach that they have the ability to do whatever they want. And so I think that was kind of like the thing that got me to look back and say, oh my gosh, you had it all along, right? But anyways, yeah, so I talk to patients about what's going to be realistic for them, right? A lot of these patients that I have spoken to, they have no background whatsoever in exercise or no understanding of nutrition whatsoever, right? And so it's a matter of like meeting them where they're at and figuring out what is going to work best for them, what's going to be realistic for them. And so, a lot of the things that I, talk about with them is like just figuring out solutions, right? Of course, we have a problem, but we don't dwell within that problem, right? We always kind of try to figure out a way how to overcome certain obstacles and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's essentially what I do. Like, talking about, how they can take 5 extra steps a day, or how they can do, eat one more apple. I don't know. I mean, it just like it really is about brainstorming and figuring out again what is going to work best for this individual, because everyone comes from such different backgrounds, such a different environment, right? So there is not like a one size fits all or a one solution for everyone. So that's kind of like the fun part for me, is like puzzle piecing all of this together for that one person.
Monica Lopez. I mean, just straight fire, professional athlete, everything. I still see you're getting the grind on. Just a minute or two, like you know, if you have eh, anything, or how can people get in contact with you, things of that nature. Just trying to get you out there. Take a minute and just let us know how do we get some more knowledge from Monica.
Yeah, so I have my Instagram at Lopez Wellness. If you guys want to learn a little bit more about health and wellness stuff, I think that would be the best way to contact me. My email is mlopezhwc@gmail.com, if that's another way. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
I think that's all you need, simple, straight to the point. So that's great. Well, thanks again for taking the time. It wraps up another great episode of the Athlete Connection. Really great to hear your story and really kind of connect back with you. I think it's been, I don't know how many years since we go back, like we said. So it's always great to kind of, for myself, and I don't want to speak for Ray, but I'm sure it's cool to kind of see how everyone's kind of evolved and come full circle from, the seventh, eighth grade days when we were training back in the day to now. You guys are full blown professionals doing your own thing and finding your
Uh,
own ways to kind of give back. So that's great.
Awesome. No, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm having flashbacks right now, and it's like just so nice to talk with y'all.
well, we love you, and you are awesome. Keep on doing your thing. Big Texas, stay cool, please, because that's humid out there,
Yes.
right?
Gosh, yeah. But we're moving back really soon. We're coming back to Cali.
I sense a collaboration.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. As always, if anyone who's listening, you have any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to us at Tri-Elements Fitness on all handles. And also feel free to check out the website, www.trielementsfitness.com. But until then, we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Peace.